JDL USA presents Rabbi Nachum Shifren, public speaker, author, and good friend of the late Rabbi Rav Kahane.
Everybody here? Natasha, you with me? All right. Let us look at this week's Parsha, VAYEIRA. By the way, that was my bar mitzvah Parsha many moons ago. Well, the Parsha starts out very interesting where Avraham Avinu, our father Avraham, is in the middle of the desert. Now, I'm not sure if it was the Sinai Desert or the Negev. Could be around Beersheba. I'm not exactly clear. Let's put it this way. It was pretty hot out. How do we know? Torah tells us that it was so hot that nobody came by. Now, why did Abraham pitch his tent out there in the middle of the midbar in the desert? Well, he was the kind of a guy where it says about him in the Torah that he represented loving kindness, giving, the kind of a guy who is looking for people to invite into his house to have a bite to eat with him. And that's exactly what he did. He put his tent in the middle of the desert. Arabs would come by. He would say, well, did you enjoy your dinner? Or did you enjoy your drink? They, of course, said yes. He said, okay, well, that'll be $100. There's a story about that. And the guys go, what? What a rip-off. He goes, I'll tell you what. You don't owe me a thing because the food's not mine. It belongs to God. Just say a prayer thanking God, and you're out of here. Pretty amazing, right? What a twist. I wonder how many restaurants would be willing to do that. So Abraham's, his whole DNA was for chesed, as it's called in Hebrew. Chesed, loving kindness, giving. That was his whole MO. Whereas when Lot, in the Parsha, we also talk about Lot in conjunction with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Everybody knows by now that Sodom and Gomorrah were not a nice place, okay? People were very mean. It says, Rashi tells us, one of the lead commentators, they were bad with their money and they were bad with their body, meaning it was pretty evil stuff going on. But it's interesting that in contrast to Abraham, who was so interested in giving to others, Lot's wife, they were told when they left the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, don't even look back. Don't let the evil, cleave to you. So she did look back, and then she became a pillar of salt. Why salt? Because our Torah tells us that when Lot would try to invite people into his house, why would he do that? Because he's the nephew of Abraham, right? So he figured out that Abraham's tremendous fortune was based on the fact that he was a giver. So Lot wanted to copy him. But his wife didn't like it. His wife used to tell him, oh, you want to introduce that evil habit into our house? Giving salt to the people was, in her eyes, evil. Putting salt on your food and whatnot. So she became a pillar of salt. That's the story of that particular thing. Now, this whole thing where Abraham pitched his tent, it was called Shel Avraham. Some people called it an inn, like where you come in and rent a room or whatever. Other people call it even like a bar kind of a setup. But nonetheless, that was what he did. Now, it says Vayikra Sham, Avraham, Vayikra Sham, Avraham. Abraham, when he was cajoling these people to give thanks to God, essentially what he did was spread the concept of God throughout the whole world. Have you ever gone into a football game or soccer game, or go to the beach, order a burger or a hot dog, whatever? Have you ever noticed what's going on there? It's kind of an amazing thing when you think about giving a blessing and than being grateful for every little thing that you eat or drink. Do you ever see that? Not much, right? Think about it a minute. You'll see that the Torah tells us that everything belongs to God. And if we don't give a blessing, it's as though we're stealing from him. It's an amazing concept when you think about it. The whole world belongs to him, except when we make a blessing before we, whether it's grace after meals or whether it is a blessing before we eat, which we do both. And contrast that with a football game and soccer games and all that. I think you get the idea. But definitely is something to think about. So we see that God's name was sanctified throughout the whole world through Abraham. Another interesting thing about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, his son. Why was that something that needed to happen? Well, God did that as a test to see how Abraham's faithfulness would be. That's a tough test to put somebody through. Nonetheless, he was the how should we say it, the litmus test for the entire world to prove that that faith, emunah, what we say, is paramount, and that if there's no emunah in God, then really there's no basis for any sort of spiritual journey, right? So also he wanted people to know the world, and of course any satanic force out there that might want to use Abraham as some sort of a wedge to give criticism or to lambaste him with some sort of decree or whatever about his justifiable deeds. Somebody might want to call into question those things. So God put that test there to still all the people that had these thoughts, right? Malevolent thoughts. But what's interesting about the Akedah and the binding of Isaac on the altar, where Abraham was going to use him as an offering, basically kill him. There's been a lot of people that have given their name up in the for the sanctification of God's name. A lot of people have given up their lives. There's no shortage of Jewish heroes who, rather than bow down, for example, to idolatry or whatever, they would prefer to have their own lives taken. So why was this so salient in Jewish history? Why this? Well, one of the things that the Torah mentions is that there's this amazing saying, Vayashkem Avraham babokir. Abraham got up in the morning on the very day after God told him to slaughter his own son. He did it early in the morning. He didn't have any slaves or any servants to help him mount his donkey or whatever it was back then, his camel. He did everything himself, and he woke up before dawn. One of the reasons that a lot of Jews who feel the need to cleave to God and to show their reverence for God by being very early in the morning through their prayers. Halachically speaking, in terms of Jewish law, we have till about the first 3 hours of the day to pray. There's no stress about praying in the morning. There are people, however, that they go above and beyond, right? And they wake up while it's still dark, so that by the time they get to the middle of their prayer, the sun is over the horizon, which is the ideal time, actually. Abraham decided that when God told him to basically to kill his son, to offer him as an offering on the altar, God did not tell him when to do it. He essentially he could have done it either the next day or the next week or the next month. There was no rush. But we learned from this a very great lesson. When we do something for the sake of heaven, we do it with alacrity, as they say. We do it with a certain purpose as quick as we can, right? To show our love for the mitzvah, for the commandment, or whatever it is that God tells us to do. Now, we see, regarding going back to Sodom and Gomorrah, we see that there's been other actions that have taken place in the past. One was the big flood. Another one was the circumcision of Abraham. And there, in both places, it says that God did it in the middle of the day. Why? Because he didn't want it, he wanted the entire world to see this amazing mitzvah, and if anybody would oppose it, God would, of course, deal with them on his terms. So this is also a sanctification of his name. These events took place in the middle of the day in order to show us that these things are, these salient points are universal, and their praise is universal. An interesting thing with when Abraham went to Egypt, and he met Avimelech there, who was the king. And I got a little bit of a sniffle, pardon me for that. They were digging wells, you may have recalled from the Parsha, and Avimelech's people were stealing the wells from Abraham. At the last part of the Parsha, when they're sitting down having a meal with each other, and then they're blessing each other and saying, okay, we're going to make an oath that neither side will, disparage or otherwise disadvantage the other side. And Abraham slips it out that, by the way, some of your servants stole some of my wells. Avimelech's reply was very, very pointed, and he said, you never told me. I didn't know that. Why didn't you tell me? We learned from this a very big thing. It's called Ochiach Tochiach et Amitecha. If something is happening, something's wrong, you're obligated to bring it up, whether it's your neighbor or your family member or whomever. A lot of people like to keep things hush-hush, and thereby letting something that is really not right or just go past the finish line. That's not the right way to do it. So we learned this through Abraham, which, by the way, he was remiss in not admonishing Avimelech and the other people that were with him. That's an interesting point that we had. At the very beginning of this podcast, the interesting and inspirational music that was played showed some interesting stuff about Sephardic Jews. I'll tell you a little story before we sign off. I was with Rabbi Kahane, Hashem Yikom Damo, and we were in the Shuka Carmel, the Carmel marketplace in the heart of Tel Aviv. And most of the owners of the stands were Sephardic Jews. What they did that day, I will never forget. They announced that Rabbi Kahane was coming to make a tour of the marketplace to, greet his well-wishers, that sort of thing. Everybody closed their stand. Now, you don't close your stand because people need the money. That's their parnasa. They close their stand, that means maybe their family have less to eat. But in that day, everybody did. And the Sephardic people said, Hine Kahane Yigia Melech Israel. They praised Rabbi Kahane as the king of Israel, the Sephardic Jews. And I remember once Rabbi Kahane said, and I know this to be at least there's a connection here. He once said to us at the yeshiva, at the Rayon HaYehudi, the name of the yeshiva, he once said to us that the Sephardic Jews were the last normal Jews. Well, everybody else is not normal. So what he really meant is the Sephardic Jews lived under Arabs for hundreds and hundreds of years. They understood them. And they understood there's no making deals with them. There's no peace. There's no this. There's no that. They're either lying or they're positioning themselves to either kill you or somehow disadvantage you. Rav Kahane believed that. He knew it. And a lot of his followers were therefore Sephardic Jews. Ashkenazi Jews are from Europe, right? Where we have the Gemütlichkeit of Germany and Hungary and all those other places. They're not from the Middle East. And this has been a serious problem for 100 years in Israel. Nobody knows the Arabs like the Sephardic Jews because they lived under them. They know them. The Ashkenazi Jews know Beethoven, Mozart, that sort of thing. Anyway, we have a lot to learn in this week's Parsha. I hope that we covered a few interesting things for you. And with the help of God and with your help, JDL will be very successful. They're turning to all of you. I'm turning to all of you. Make a small donation to them, and it will be absolutely make everybody happy. Whoever's involved in that mitzvah. So God bless everybody. Have a Shabbat Shalom, and we're looking forward to talking to you next week. All the best.